All right, and we're live here at the Triangle Bitcoin and Business Meetup. Hope everybody has been enjoying the latest developments and drama in the Bitcoin space. It's always exciting. Hopefully, the latest price crash doesn't have you down too much. But we're very excited to talk about really the next generation of technologies that are going to be built on top of Bitcoin. We have with us Alex Bosworth, who is actually a former coworker of mine. We worked at BitGo together for a year or two, and he departed a few months ago to basically start working on various Lightning projects full time. And then I actually departed last week and just started at a new security company myself. We can talk more about that afterwards. But Alex, don't want to spend too much time flapping my gums here, so I guess I will just go ahead and hand it over to you and let us know what the future will hold with Bitcoin and the Lightning Network.
Oh, wow, cool. Well, I'll do my best. So, you know, my slides are called Supercharging and picked, but I want to give a high level overview of what Lightning is and how it can play with your existing Bitcoin businesses or maybe new businesses. So I'm Alex Bosworth, and Jameson mentioned we work together at BitGo, but I've kind of been a long time Bitcoiner, and I only really started working on it professionally in 2016. I worked at the hacker residency program with the core developers at Chaincode Labs. And then I went to work at BitGo, where I worked on the BTCD fork and worked on building a product around that. And as far as Lightning goes, I've been working with it since early 2017. And I've just known to be, a potential game changer. But I wanted to kind of play with it and work specifically with LND. And since, whoa, got some test coins coming in. So the thing that I've been working on, actually, that was pretty fortuitous because I've been working on a Mac OS LND wallet. And I started work on it before Lightning Labs themselves had their own graphical user interface. And then out of that came a couple projects that I wanted to do as test projects for figuring out how Lightning is going to work. And one of the projects is called HTLC.me. And that's a custodial wallet for Lightning. So that would be like what you would have with a Coinbase. So the coins are hosted on the website, and then you spend it out of your account there. And I worked on another project called yalls.org, and I created that as kind of like a shop that you can spend your coins that you have in your Lightning wallet to read articles or to publish articles, and then you can make some money, make some testnet money by getting other people to read your articles. So, if I'm going to talk about Lightning, I think everything really does start with Bitcoin. Lightning is like extending Bitcoin. It's taking the same benefits that we have with Bitcoin and making them even better. So number one, we want to build something that is trustless, where you don't have to, you can just interact with somebody over the internet and you get good guarantees about what you're getting, that you're getting paid. We want to make something that's permissionless, where you can just join this system and everybody's an equal and the network is open to everybody. And that, Bitcoin is a reliable system, right? We're trying to design this to be a network where people can build upon it and that it's not changing around on people. And I mean, that's hopefully the goal. So that's what we get with Bitcoin. And that's even why we get to have Lightning, is that, it's another layer that doesn't require Bitcoin to even know about it. And it's reliable, that we can have these off-chain transactions that we could then push into the chain as we need to. So, one way I like to think about Lightning is that it takes a global system, which is Bitcoin, and it makes it into a local system. So when you're working with Lightning, Lightning is a network across the world, but really all you have is a connection of your peers. And you only actually need one other peer in order to make a Lightning transaction. So if somebody's sitting next to me and they want to get a Lightning transaction from me. In Bitcoin, it's a global system. If I send a transaction to the person sitting next to me, that doesn't really matter at all. But in Lightning, that's fine, because we're working from the reference point of Bitcoin. And so that allows the Lightning transactions to have all the benefits of local. And that includes being fast, because the person is sitting right next to me. I'm not bound by the speed of light. I'm not sending this transaction to be to every single point in the globe. And it allows these transactions to be more private. The standard of Bitcoin is that it's a global system that is a transparent system. Everybody's seeing all these transactions that everybody's broadcasting to everybody in the world. These peers are all known to everybody. In Lightning, only myself and the other party, or maybe the route of parties, need to know about these transactions. I mean, it's still potentially global, because all of those guys might, reveal certain aspects of this transaction, and that's something that, might become known to everybody. But at the base level, it's pretty private. And because we're not making that these transactions have to be synced and validated by everybody in the entire world, they can be cheap. So just me and my friend need to know about this, or me and these small set of people on the route. So the fees can be very low, and it can be very attractive versus a Bitcoin, which is a global, expensive system. So I have kind of a demo of what Lightning will look like in the real world, that these guys, so I've kind of set up a potential future where we have a point of sale system using Lightning. So I'll show kind of the video of like what it would look like. So this is kind of like at broad strokes, what Lightning will be like. It will be similar to what we already experienced. Like the user experience in that video was kind of a rough take of like what I could build based on Lightning. But in the future, we can make it way better than what I showed. And I've already even made improvements on that existing software. So as you integrate Lightning, it can be that you have that use, instead of making a Bitcoin invoice, you're now making a Lightning invoice. And then from there, it can get way faster and way easier, because you're going to get things, instead of having to actually think about how many confirmations you're waiting for and having to deal with, potentially having too low of a fee or things like that, it can be much faster and easier and more straightforward. And another thing in the user experience that is going to change as far as users who are interacting with your business is that they're no longer going to get transaction IDs that they're going to be able to go look up on Blockchain Explorer. So like when I was really like thinking originally about what is Lightning and what is going to be the user experience, I was thinking, I didn't really know. I thought maybe it's just going to be like I send to an address and then it will just be faster somehow. And I will still have some kind of transaction ID. But in Lightning, actually, it's better. You have a proof of payment. And that means you have a signed statement from the merchant that says, here is what I am selling you, potentially. You can include a description in the actual invoice. And it's a signed statement, and it includes a hash. And when you pay, you get a secret, a pre-image that matches that hash. And because there's a signature, you have this self-contained proof of payment. So that will take the place of transaction IDs. You won't need to go to a block explorer, a third-party block explorer anymore to say that this transaction completed. And another interesting thing about how the user experience will change is that instead of creating new addresses just randomly, and then people having to worry about, am I sending to the right place? Is this signed by how did I get the address? Is there a good provenance of that? You'll still have some similar problems, but what you're going to have now is going to be a consistent public key identity. So when people interact with your business, they're going to see the same public key that they used before. And I've been working with other wallet developers like Zap and thinking about how can we use that public key to make the user experience really fast and easy. So if I've interacted before with a business that I trust, like a coffee shop, I might be able to say, well, in the case that it's the same public key that I'm paying, for a cup of coffee, let's not give me a bunch of hassle with confirmations of like, do I really want to send to this person? So there's a lot of potential improvements of the user experience given the nature of Lightning. So one thing I want to make clear is like, I don't work for Lightning Corp. Sometimes I talk to people and they're like, okay, Lightning sounds cool. How do I buy into the ICO? But there's no ICO here. This is a protocol that isn't really controlled by anybody. It's just kind of describing how we're going to work together. And that makes it pretty powerful in terms of business, because you're not like getting locked into a certain system. And you don't have to make separate deals. You don't have to make a deal with Lightning Corp in order to get all the benefits of the system. You can start right now, and you'll be on even footing with everybody as far as taking advantage of Lightning. And the other thing I want to stress is like, even though Lightning extends Bitcoin, it's made on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is the best. Well, Lightning is not only about Bitcoin. And even Bitcoin, if you love Bitcoin, you still want to trade Bitcoin for other things. So that's one thing that makes Lightning pretty powerful, is that it goes beyond Bitcoin. In fact, Bitcoin as a chain is just an ID in the protocol. So testnet is an ID, and Bitcoin main chain is an ID. So Litecoin can be an ID, and these can work together based on minimal common parameters. And so the benefit of this is you're going to get a maximal network effect. So like even if you and I have different opinions about the world, and for some reason Bitcoin doesn't appeal to you, we can still work together. We can still be compatible with each other, and your business can still be compatible with a wide set of people. So it removes kind of that limitation that Bitcoin has, where people don't maybe have the same assumptions of what they want to hold. And I'd say, like, people don't realize this, but it's not even that have to be building blocks of Lightning. It can even be a database. It can be anything that two peers are willing to connect with each other and share an assumption about a state transfer. And not only are two peers going to be able to trade with each other, but the peers outside of those two peers are going to be able to trade with each other. So I can pay somebody in Bitcoin, and then they can relay that to the other thing that the other person wants, and without me having to touch or deal with that other thing at all. So that's kind of far out thinking. In the beginning, probably what we're going to have is just Litecoin and other coins that are pretty similar to Bitcoin, where we can take the existing code base of Lightning, or the C Lightning, async there, Eclair, and LND, and take the same code bases to SegWit chains that have OpsESV and OpsELTV. So I have a little network graph that I've developed. So over time, since the beginning of 2017, I've been taking a few screenshots of like how the network is visualizing differently. And so I'll show you kind of like how the nodes are kind of progressing. So here it is in the beginning. And as it grows, the network is, becoming exponentially bigger and bigger, and we're getting more and more connections. So, what I want to stress is like that even if you don't, you're kind of on the fence, you don't know if Lightning is that interesting, it's still going to happen anyway. Like, people are doing it. Maybe Lightning isn't even the best solution. It might be that like Chaumian banks are better. It might be that centralized systems might be more efficient or something, but that doesn't even really matter too much in terms of like adoption, because people are making these wallets, they're adapting existing wallets for layer 2. And so if you are a business and you're working with Bitcoin, at the very least, you should be paying attention to Lightning, just because that's what's happening. And the other aspect that I'd like to focus on in terms of like Lightning is coming, or that a layer 2 is coming, is that the chain fees, we saw them hit a wall, and we saw even in other chains that didn't have the same restrictions on terms of the amount of transactions that can be processed, even they have had their fees go up, because the global system is not the most efficient system. Layer 2 is a more efficient system for these types of transactions. So as a business, you really have to like modify your thinking to get on board with that, because that's just a reality of what's going to happen. And I'd say like there's all sorts of cool ideas. There's so many good ideas about what we can do with Bitcoin. Tumblebit. There's somebody mentioned this Bolt network. There's all sorts of cool projects, but Lightning is the one to pay attention to, because if you look at the momentum, Lightning has the momentum of all of the developers. It has all of the implementations, and this is a lot of work. We got to build, all of these tools. So Lightning is kind of a good one to put your chips on. So I have a video of kind of like some improvements that I've been making as I've been developing on Lightning. And you saw in the early video that the Lightning payment flow is a little bit slow. It's more similar to a standard payment flow. And so one thing I've been working on is trying to make the payment flow on the server side become very quick. So here's a demo of an improvement in the speed that I've been able to achieve. So it starts off, this is my website, y'all's, and that's kind of a slow payment. And here's a fast payment. It just immediately happens. So one thing I want to stress is like that you have the ability to make new businesses, things that didn't exist before, so you have your existing Bitcoin businesses that take advantage of the existing properties of Bitcoin, but there's also the opportunities to take advantage of the new type of transactions that Lightning will allow. So y'all's is kind of an example. I mean, I'm not developing y'all's as a business, but it kind of demonstrates that you can have these micropayments. So, you can start to build a business based on paying a penny or a fraction of a penny. You can have utility that's based on, every second, pay every second. And Lightning is also the way that the smart contracts work. You have this payment pre-image and this payment hash, and that will itself allow for new business types, like atomic swapping. That will become something that will just be easier to accomplish with Lightning. And there's other perspective improvements like scriptless scripts, where you can add in oracles into your payments. So we're not just improving and evolving Bitcoin, we're creating also a new platform with new opportunities that didn't exist before. And the other thing, even if you're not focused on Lightning, and even if you're not focused on Bitcoin, the one thing to think about in terms of what is going to change with Lightning is that you will no longer really have to be thinking about about Bitcoin. Like, let's say you want to build a new service, and you know that you have a service that's going to appeal to people who are interested in cryptocurrency, any cryptocurrency. You can focus on your business and then charge in Lightning. And because Lightning is cross-chain, You're no longer needing to build infrastructure for every different token you want to use. You no longer need to bet on every specific token in terms of what you're building. Like if you want to focus on Bitcoin and say everybody else, you can pay in whatever you like, but what I'm going to get is Bitcoin. That's possible, and that will make it better in terms of building your specific value. So generally, I talk about how Lightning is amazing and it's awesome, but there are some caveats to the system. It's not a perfect system, and it doesn't replace all sorts of things. And there's still tons of things to fix and improve upon. So number one, I'd say that Lightning is not more secure than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the underlying basis for Lightning. So every security issue that Bitcoin has, Lightning will inherit. Plus, it has its own platform, so it will have its own security issues. So it'll be worse, strictly worse, although it is pretty good. The privacy that I mentioned before, that exists between you and your friend who you're doing your Lightning trades with, but there's other privacy aspects that are not fully worked out, such as if he does share this information with the world, or if somebody in the route that you don't know does share the information about your transaction in the world, then maybe you aren't really getting any privacy wins here. And the fact that you have this consistent public key is also kind of an interesting privacy consideration. The same feature that lets you pay the same merchant over and over again and know that you're paying the same merchant, you can use that to notice that if that merchant is selling you goods on one store and the merchant is selling you goods on another store, now you can kind of recognize that those are the same merchant. So when I was talking about security, I was saying that security is good, but I was talking about like existential security of the whole network. But there's also security to consider in terms of your operational security of running your Lightning business. You're going to need to keep funds hot in Lightning because the funds are in the channels, and you need to keep your node online in order to. Well, I keep getting Tesla coins. You need to keep your funds hot. So that's just something you really need to think about. Of like, this is kind of like an increased burden of running Lightning. Another issue is like the routes that the initial network will be pretty limited, and the algorithms for finding routes will also be limited. This is an area that's being improved, and there's not too many people in the network in the beginning. So you're going to have issues where the early Lightning customers may have to put up with the fact that like they won't always be able to make the payment. They might hit a capacity limit. They might hit a routing failure. You can always fail back to the chain, but in the beginning, routing might be a problem for you. And that also goes to the fact that if you make a new Lightning service, if you build a new business based on Lightning, well, there's a whole new challenge ahead where we've got to get people to adopt Lightning wallets and to switch their funds into channels and to bootstrap this whole new network. And the network will get better and better as more people join it. But in the beginning, it will actually be at its weakest in terms of utility to everybody who uses it. So, I've talked about things like at a high level in terms of what Lightning is, but I would suggest that the best way to get information on Lightning is actually just to make it yourself, to build it yourself, to run it yourself, and even anybody can do it. Like you can use my web wallet, htlc.me. Or you can use a bunch of different wallets. I've recommended them on yalls.org/wallets, or you can build the nodes yourself. And that's really good just to get a sense of what it's like to work with Lightning. And I think everybody should try it. And I feel like everybody is trying it, so there's good momentum going there. And there's also a great community of people in Lightning. A lot of people are joining it as developers on the Lightning protocol. I'm not a Lightning protocol developer. I'm more like a Lightning app developer. But there's also a lot of Lightning app developers who are coming. So there's an L&D Slack. The RFC is pretty active. There's free node channels. And people are excited about Lightning and willing to talk about it. There's a mailing list. So I would get involved with those things. And then, I'm trying to like keep everybody updated on what's going on. So on my Twitter, I'm Alex Bosworth. So hopefully I can keep everybody updated and, try to distill some of the developments as they go. Okay. I went a little fast.
Show us your pretty mug. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sure we've got plenty of questions. And in fact, maybe we should just sort of start off a little more high level with, going back to, what is the Lightning Network? Basically we're creating all these payment channels between peers and then connecting those payment channels together so that you can sort of push money around this network in a peer-to-peer but trustless fashion. And so that's, I guess, the initial premise is just being able to do really fast payments because we're not doing this like global broadcast mechanism, but we're doing a more highly routed mechanism, which is really the same way the internet itself works, right? Is sort of your base layer, your like Ethernet layer is this global broadcast mechanism, and then we build other layers on top of it that make it more efficient so that we can use the network that is there, but in a better way. So you mentioned a few different things like about the multi-currency support. Can you talk a little bit about like how does that actually work? Like if you're running a Lightning node and a Bitcoin node, then how can someone else, from their perspective, pay you in Litecoin, but you receive Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's one of the most exciting things about Lightning is that it can route across currencies. Currently, you can't really try it. So they're still working on kind of like how that's going to work. But essentially, if you want to be a router across networks, you run two different chains. So you run your Litecoin node, say, and your Bitcoin node, and the LND will, or whatever your Lightning node is, will advertise multiple routes. And so in each route has that chain parameter I talked about. And from the view of the outside, let's say somebody gives a Litecoin invoice, they will query the routes the same way that they would send to anybody. And the same principles still apply because you have a hash and a pre-image that will be able to follow the same protocol as you go through Bitcoin to Litecoin. You can even go back to Bitcoin. As long as the pre-image and the hash guarantees are still kept by the same peers, it will the routing will work. And so you can say I'm sending to somebody who wants Litecoin, or you can even let's say you have Bitcoin, you want Litecoin yourself. You can generate your own invoice for Litecoin and pay yourself, and that allows you to trade your own Bitcoin for Litecoin without having to trust a third party.
Gotcha. And I guess that kind of gets towards the whole concept of decentralized exchanges and asset swaps and all of that, right?
Right. So the rate limit, the rate advertising is kind of built into the system at the native level, because what I'm doing when I'm routing is I'm trading somebody. I'm saying, I want you to trade a secret with this person, and I want you to trade a secret with this person. And because we have this protocol for how we're trading these secrets, the secrets don't necessarily have to be tied to any particular chain.
Cool. All right. First question.
So I wanted to go back to like a simple transfer or a transaction. So if you're in the coffee shop, do I have to first deposit money into the account and make a transaction with the coffee shop, and then we do transactions over a period of time and then clear it later, or is that not quite the right understanding here?
So it is correct that in the beginning of the network, let's imagine that the network had basically nobody in it, just you and the coffee shop owner. You'd have to make a channel to them initially in order to make future payments. So let's say you go into the coffee shop every day. Well, you'd actually still kind of see a benefit potentially because of the fees. Maybe, instead of paying $1 per day in fees, you would pay nothing because you paid the fees up front with the aggregated transaction. As the network grows, you would expect to have that situation happen less and less. That the merchant would be connectable from your wallet by a series of other nodes. So like not having to create channels is the ultimate goal of Lightning, and it's going to depend on the capacity. So it's more likely that you're going to have capacity for a small amount through the network to pay for your coffee than it is that you're going to have a huge capacity to pay for like a car. So like that's good. That's something that will just progressively, hopefully, get better as the Lightning Network matures.
All right. Next.
I guess the question was, will there be or two questions. One is the bidding. Is there going to be bidding for who gets to do the exchange if there are multiple coins? There's a Bitcoin and a Litecoin in the process. Will people say, hey, I'll do that exchange? Or will it just come to the first one, or will they have to have an agreed upon exchange? And then the second one is, how does the second party validate that QR code?
Okay. So as far as bidding goes, it doesn't work like a bid and ask market. So it's not a decentralized market. Instead, it's more like a routing market. So what you will do as a participant in the network is you'll advertise a rate, and so the other nodes will choose you to trade based on two aspects. One is they'll look at your rate and they'll say, this guy says he'll trade Litecoin to Bitcoin at this rate, and there'll be two components to that rate. One will be like a minimum fee, and the other one which will be like a percentage-based rate. And anybody can choose their own rate, and it will be the sender who decides the route. So the sender, has one thing they're thinking about is they want to pay the least. So that's how like they will kind of choose which bid. The other aspect is, as the router, as a sender, you don't know exactly who's online at any given time, or even how much capacity any single person has at any specific point in time. So the other thing you'll be thinking about when you're going for those bids is, who do I know has been around a while and has good capacity and is responsive? So if you want to be market making and getting people to use you as a route, what you'll want to do is keep your node online and keep your fees competitive in the network. So the second question was about the QR code. Like, how do I validate that the QR code is good? So the QR code is just encoding the invoice. That's all it does. It just encodes the invoice. And so how do I know that the invoice is good? The invoice has the hash, and I'll know that I've paid once I have the pre-image to that hash. So it's a pretty simple process in terms of like, how do I know that this is a good invoice? I'll be able to go to the merchant and I can say, look, I have this invoice and it's signed with your public key, and it even signed over the description of what I'm going to buy. And it says, if you get the pre-image to this hash, you get this cup of coffee. So all you have to do is just make sure just do a normal hash of the pre-image, and you can check the ECDSA signature that's on the invoice and say, look, I paid you for this coffee, and you said, here's your promise.
Crypto all the way down. All right. Yes, sir.
Okay. First, I'd like your wallet over all of the other Lightning node wallets currently. You have made some drastic improvements. So, bravo. The second is, when were we going to integrate atomic swaps into the network? Because currently one of the limitations, I run about 10 different nodes. Some of them have as many as 500-600 connections. And some friends and I were testing between the swapping, and if I was depleted on my Litecoin or my Bitcoin, well, then everything began to fail. We began to see where all sorts of transactions would fail and get logged up for 24 hours or more. How are we going to prevent all of that type of a situation with the current situation of me having to have such a large stake, as well as a hot amount of BTC or LTC in my wallet, so that all of that swapping can happen?
Yeah. That's an awesome question, because that's exactly the kind of thing that I've been thinking about and I've been working on almost 100%. Is number one, how can we start getting atomic swaps happening? And number two is, how do we deal with capacity problems? So I'm going to be able to release something hopefully soon. I've been coding on it, that will kind of like show actual atomic swaps, like that you'll be able to run yourself. But atomic swaps are going to be actually two types of atomic swaps, and I'm only working on one type. So one type is you can look at work that Connor at Lightning Labs has been doing, which will be off-chain to off-chain atomic swaps. So if you have too much like I talked about before, which is routing through the existing network and not paying chain fees and happening instantly without settlement. But I'm not working on that. I'm actually working on the other side of atomic swaps. Lualu calls them, Lualu, who's like the chief engineer at Lightning Labs, he calls these submarine swaps. So that's where you have off-chain to on-chain swaps. So I think that's pretty exciting, because you can give somebody an invoice, a Lightning invoice, and have them pay you on a chain. It could be a different chain, and that can be done atomically. So you can set the destination of the on-chain to be the hash of the off-chain, and so paying the off-chain reveals the pre-image, the secret, and you use that secret on the on-chain to claim those funds. So I've been working on some solutions around making it easier to trade and making it easier for there to be capacity adjustments even between off-chain and on-chain on the same chain. But I haven't been ready to publicize anything. But hopefully when I do, that will be completely open source, something that anybody can run. And I've been working on trying to productize that and to make it something that people can actually use as part of their business.
Hey, Alex, thanks so much for all the educational materials and demonstrations. It's really fun to follow you on Twitter to see the stuff. So one question and possibly a follow-up depending on your answer. So can you talk about the full node requirements for running Lightning? And if it's a really strict requirement, can you talk about how businesses might think about a multi-location business like a fast food place or some place that has 20 locations around town? How would they theoretically manage their full node situation if it's a requirement for that location?
Sure. A full node is not required to run a Lightning node. So you can run using Neutrino in LND already without a Lightning node, or without a full node. You can run your Lightning node. But a full node is required if you want to use it in a trustless way, especially if you're receiving money. So I would recommend it. I currently use BTCD as a full node. I'm also testing Bitcoin Core as a full node for my backing node for my LND node. But in the future, I think you can, number one, hardware will get better, and Bitcoin is trying to constrain the resource requirements from expanding of running the full node. Right now, you need to run a lot of indexing on the full nodes to use with Lightning. But in the future, I don't see why you can't use prune modes to kind of like lower the footprint of the node that you're running. So there's like a wide spectrum of answers. I think it's reasonable that businesses can run full nodes, and that they should. And I would recommend people to run full nodes. That's going to keep the system most secure, and you have least hassles, and the cost isn't too high if we can make it use pruning and make it use all these other improvements that will reduce the cost.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem to me that you have certain timeouts on these channels, right? And I forget what the defaults are, whether it's like a week or a month. So it would seem like you would only really need to have a node that's pruned to have like that level of recent history, right? Rather than actually have the entire 9 years of blockchain.
Well, it's essentially like any other wallet. You as the blocks come in, you look for what you're interested in, and then you just plug that into your database. And there's no explicit timeouts even on a channel. So you can keep a channel open for years. The timeouts that you really care about are when people do weird type of closes. So if the other guy, for some reason, he decides to broadcast his transaction immediately, there's incentives for him not to do that, but it's possible that he does that. In that case, then there's a timeout that starts. Or if routing fails, in that case, there's also timeouts. But in the general case, all you're doing is just watching for normal transactions, and that will be a 2 of 2 multi-sig sending out to a normal address that you like.
All right, let's get a new question.
Thanks a lot. So can you talk a little bit more about Neutrino and what benefits that offers over SPV wallets? And if you think that technology will come back to the main chain as well?
Yeah, so Neutrino already works with the main chain. I mean, I've run it with the main chain. Works great. It's still currently, being developed as a standard. BTCD has, with Lualu's fork, supports it. It's technically called compact client-side filtering, I think. It has a BIP. And there's also Bcoin, which is a JavaScript implementation developed by Purse.io. They also support it. And it will still run on mainnet. The things that it's going to bring, I think it will replace Bloom filters. So all of the existing SPV clients, I think, are obsoleted by client-side filtering. And I think actually Bloom filters are kind of widely recognized as being a bad idea, both in terms of if you run your node, you should probably turn off Bloom filters because there's DOS vectors associated with it. And as a client, you don't want Bloom filters because although they were designed to keep your transactions private from the network through your requests, it's actually not private. So people's SPV clients are kind of broadcasting to everybody all their funds. You're telling everybody about the contents of your wallet. So Neutrino is designed to be a lot better. Neutrino is pretty cool. It doesn't, so like the model, like I'm not the author of Neutrino, but like some of the cool things that I've heard about it is like if you're a Bloom filter model, you ask a full node, please tell me about all these set of addresses, and then the full node incurs a lot of work. It has to go and do this querying for you, and you basically pay it nothing. So there's an incentive problem there. Whereas with compact client-side filters, you've already kind of pre-done all the work by building this index. And this index could even actually be served by a non-full node. You can even use a content delivery network to serve these blocks. You don't need full nodes even for the client side, for the SPV nodes. So I think that'll be a real game changer once Neutrino is implemented, there's a core implementation, and that the BIP is finalized. I'd say that will totally change all SPV clients.
Hey, yeah, thanks for your talk. I run a full node, and I've been thinking about running a Lightning node as well. I was a little worried about how much of my own Bitcoin I might have to put at stake in order to actually kind of do this as a business. Do you have to stake any of your own Bitcoin in order to do this?
Sure, I've actually, I mean, in order to play on mainnet, you've got to play with real money. So
Reckless.
yeah. So that's actually one benefit though of Lightning is that you don't have to use a lot of money, especially if the fees are low like they are right now. You can play with 1 Satoshi. Like a channel can actually the base unit of Lightning is less than a Satoshi. It's a 1,000th of a Satoshi. So you don't really need to risk a lot of money if you are not building a service that really requires a lot of money. And also there's inherent limitations in the protocol itself where you can't even pay that much. There's a limitation on the size that's by convention that a channel can only be a certain size and certain value, and even an individual transaction can only be like a quarter of that total value.
What I was interested in was potential processing, network, and speed or simplicity characteristics compared to something like Square. If you're trying to get it lightweight and fast and out into food trucks, let's say, um, kind of what? How would somebody, a vendor that's currently using Square, be and be convinced that yeah, Lightning would be as good or better?
Yeah, like as you saw in my demo, actually, I just loaded, that was actually on a Square terminal, just loading up a website though. In order to get better, that's a pretty tough ask when you've already got like Apple Pay, where you can just tap on your phone. I think we can get equal to that though, because in order to settle, it can be done in milliseconds. All you need to do is communicate a very narrow piece of information. There's no like long settlement time. It should be much faster and easier than doing a Bitcoin transaction. But making it better, I'd say, really depends on convincing people that they want to hold Bitcoin and use Bitcoin or whatever currency they're interested in. I was talking to the merchant, the guy who runs that coffee shop, and I'd say that you might want to make the case to the merchant themselves, because they might say, oh, well, every cup of coffee that I'm selling, I'm giving this amount to Visa, and I'm not happy about that. So maybe they would be the movers in terms of like convincing them that there's a big benefit to using Bitcoin. But overall, I'd say the mission in terms of getting people to use Bitcoin is getting people to believe in Bitcoin and the characteristics of it, rather than just like it's a better payment system, even with Lightning being a great payment system.
One of the things I do believe we need to strive for is that we need to make Lightning Network as easy of an interface for the general public as Square, with the benefit of the lower costs. Currently, it's far too complex. Only geeks like us enjoy it. But when I try to explain it to a business or you're trying to say, wait a minute, so I got to set up all my customers and they got to connect to me and I got to put a bunch of money up. That currently is completely unappealing. When are we going to be able to overcome that? Because I believe there's a lot of potential, but there's a lot of downside currently.
Yeah, I'd say that in the beginning of Lightning, it's going to have all of the problems of setting up Bitcoin and then new problems of setting up Lightning. Like that's one thing that I was working on when I was doing my own wallet for Lightning, is that I realized that I'm not just making a wallet for Bitcoin or for Lightning, I'm also making a wallet for Bitcoin, because people are going to want to send both, and both behave differently. But I think at the end, if you go to like the website htlc.me, I took the other approach there. I said, why don't I just try to make it as simple as possible? And you just have your balance there, and I'm going to forget about the trustless part of it, because htlc.me is a custodial wallet, and just focus on spending. And Square actually is interested in Bitcoin, and they're working on integrating it, and they're interested in Lightning specifically. So Square themselves might become the conduit in terms of how an average person actually does business with Bitcoin over Lightning. And one interesting thing is, with a custodial wallet, even something like Square, where you give up your funds to Square, when you have Lightning, you have a lot more mobility in your funds. So maybe I don't have to trust Square with a lot of money, or maybe I set up my real wallet to pay out to Square, on a regular basis or something, and then Square handles all of the moving parts, and I don't really have to pay a lot of fees to keep just a small amount of funds on Square.
Yeah, so sort of from that usability standpoint, are any of the Lightning wallets implementing like an automatic fallback mechanism, where if for some reason the Lightning payment doesn't work, it automatically makes an on-chain payment?
Yeah, in the protocol in the invoice protocol specifically, there's a field where you can say, here's a fallback address. If the Lightning payment fails, you can always pay on chain. and that will be part of the invoice itself. L&D doesn't currently support the recognition of those payments that are on the chain, but you can add it to the invoice already. I added a feature on HTLC.me where you could pay on chain if you didn't want to pay using Lightning, although I've just removed that feature. Because that's something actually I think atomic swaps can be very interesting for, where you don't necessarily pay on the same chain that the Lightning invoice was issued on. And I also think that it's going to be tricky. This is just something we're going to have to figure out, because maybe if I give you a Lightning invoice and it's for 5 cents, I don't really want you to pay me 5 cents in Bitcoin, but I would accept 5 cents on some other system. So that's one thing that I'm working on currently, is figuring out alternatives or atomic swaps for other situations, other means of settlement where Lightning and Bitcoin are not perfect, or you have these balancing issues.
Yeah, that's interesting.